What makes fear seep into the very marrow of our bones? Few films manage to penetrate this question, but when they do, they become unforgettable. In 2008, The Strangers answered the call with eerie simplicity, capturing an atmosphere of dread that's as inescapable as it is haunting. It cemented itself as a modern horror classic, forcing us to confront the truth so unnerving it feels invasive. We are never truly safe. Now, fast forward 15 years to The Strangers Chapter 1, a reimagining that aims to expand and evolve the story for today's audience. But does it achieve the same level of terror? Or does it sacrifice what made the predecessor so menacingly effective? While Chapter 1 brings fresh ideas, it's the raw, almost primal simplicity of The Strangers 08 that continues to strike the deepest nerve. In today's episode of Horror Revisited, we're not here to discuss one, but two films, and explore how each approaches horror, atmosphere, and storytelling. So get cozy, check your surroundings, and don't answer the door as we come face to face with Scarecrow, Dollface, and Pinup Girl.
You know how they say that your first kill's the hardest? You're my second.
Nice hearing from you, Carlos.
Okay, so let's discuss the atmosphere of both. The Strangers from 2008 thrives on it. Set in an isolated rural house, it doesn't rely on complex narratives or over-the-top scares to instill fear. Granted, it does have heart-stopping jump scares. Director Brian Bertino masterfully uses long silences, slow-building tension, and eerie stillness to invoke the unsettling feeling that something is wrong, even before the masked intruders arrive. The camera work is intentionally voyeuristic, creating a sense of helplessness for both the protagonist and the audience. The empty spaces and long takes heighten the feeling of vulnerability, making us painfully aware of the impending threat without ever fully seeing it. On the other hand, The Strangers Chapter 1 takes a more modern approach, incorporating some action-driven horror elements. Directed by Die Hard 2 scribe Renny Harlin, this adaptation seems keen to appeal to the expectations of today's horror fans, with quick edits, loud jump scares, and a faster pace that caters to thrill seekers. Though it succeeds in keeping the audience engaged, it does sacrifice that dreadful anticipation and silence that made the original so unsettling. The environment in Chapter 1 feels less claustrophobic and more produced, creating a polished but ultimately less immersive atmosphere. If we had to pick a winner, we'd stick with the 08 version, of course. It utilizes the atmosphere, and not just as a backdrop, but as a central element of fear. Chapter 1 may be entertaining, but it misses the minimalist power of silence and space that gave the original film its haunting edge. The characters in The Strangers feel authentic. James and Kristen, played by Scott Speedman and Liv Tyler, are ordinary people with flaws and tensions of their own. The relationship's fragile state adds an extra layer to the horror as they are forced to face a faceless evil amid their emotional turmoil. The film doesn't glamorize their fear. They scream, panic, and make mistakes just as any real person would. This focus on realism enhances the terror, making it easier for the audience to project themselves onto the characters. Now, Chapter 1 attempts to develop its characters, but they lack the raw, emotional depth of James and Kristen. Our new protagonists, Maya and Ryan, feel more like archetypes than real people. They just seem like happy-go-lucky folks who, wander off the highway to find a diner. It diminishes the tension. They act according to the horror conventions rather than the genuine human response. It distances the audience from the terror. The Strangers grounds its horror in the believable terror of regular people facing an unimaginable situation. This level of relatability makes the fear personal and visceral. In contrast, Chapter 1 struggles to make its characters feel real, thus robbing the story of the psychological impact that defines The Strangers.
Are you sinners?
Aren't we all?
One of the most disturbing aspects of these films is the lack of explanation behind the masked intruders' motives. The killers embody the nightmare of random violence. They attack simply because their victims were home, and this absence of a clear reason amplifies the horror. It taps into the universal fear that bad things can happen to anyone, anytime, for no reason at all. Plus, they are out there in the woods with no surroundings. It doesn't help the situation. Chapter 1, however, struggles with this element. While the killers remain enigmatic, the film hints at backstories and motivations, potentially setting up a larger mythology. Now listen, while some may appreciate this world building, and I can't blame them, it does ultimately detract from the original strength. Chapter 1 introduces a slight predictability to their evil, undermining the terrifying randomness that defines the first film. In The Strangers, the killers remain purely malevolent, which makes them infinitely more terrifying. Their lack of backstory leaves the audience with no safety net, no understanding of how or why this could have happened. And trying to explain more, Chapter 1 dilutes the chilling mystery of the original killers and sets up future films to possibly give us our revamped masked murderers a backstory.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
The pacing of both films feels deliberate and slow when comparing runtimes. They both clock in at less than 90 minutes. The Strangers takes its time to allow the horror to build, capturing the moments of silence and isolation to make the protagonists feel completely vulnerable, making each moment of violence or intrusion feel deeply disturbing. Chapter 1 opts for a faster pace, adding more action scenes and set pieces to keep the viewers on edge. We also get a short glimpse into the townspeople and who, if any of them, could be the killers. While this makes the film feel more accessible to a modern audience, it limits the suspense. The emphasis on quick scares and high-energy sequences disrupts the steady build-up that defined the original, turning the experience into something closer to a slasher than the relentless psychological horror of the original film. The Strangers' pacing is used as a tool to create unease, whereas Chapter 1 trades tension for excitement. The slow burn approach of the original lingers in the mind long after the film ends, while the high-octane approach of Chapter 1 offers more of a fleeting thrill.
Try to stay calm. We're pinpointing your location and we're going.
These films leave a haunting impact, largely because of what it doesn't tell us. The original film's terror lies in its simplicity, and its refusal to give the audience any understanding of the killer's identities or motives. When Kristen tearfully asks,
Why are you doing this to us?
the masked intruder chillingly replies,
Because you were home.
This line, brutal in its randomness, solidifies the film's central horror. By not revealing who the killers are or why they choose their victims, the Strangers transform them into faceless representations of pure, unpredictable malevolence. This mystery taps into our primal fears of the unknown, a tactic that has made the Strangers endure as one of the most unsettling home invasion horrors of the last few decades. In contrast, Chapter 1 and its planned sequels aim to explore a more elaborate backstory, while adding layers to the killers may provide context and intrigue. And hey, it may work on its own vibe, right? It still risks undermining what made the original so haunting. By revealing who the killers are and possibly delving into why they choose their victims, Chapter 1 could inadvertently humanize them, taking them from terrifying symbols of random chaos to villains with predictable patterns. One of the core strengths of The Strangers lies in its capacity to leave us wondering, could this happen to anyone? At any time, for no reason? The random violence becomes a mirror reflecting our fears of vulnerability in an unpredictable world. When horror movies reveal too much about their villains, the danger becomes more understandable and less frightening. Horror's unique power often lies in its ability to make the unknowable feel threateningly close. Chapter 1's attempt to expand on the killer's identities and motives may succeed in fleshing out the trilogy's narrative. Like I said, it could work on its own terms, but this choice also risks boxing in the horror. Knowing more about the killers might make them more logical antagonists, villains that can be explained, tracked, or possibly even sympathized with. Even if the backstory is dark or twisted, it risks taking away the faceless anonymity that made them so terrifying in the original. Horror thrives on mystery, on leaving enough of the darkness unexplained to allow viewers' imaginations to fill in the terrifying blanks.
The hell are you waiting for?
Well, right now I'm just waiting on my turkey melt.
In the end, what makes The Strangers so effective and why fans may find it more frightening than Chapter 1 is its commitment to ambiguity. Their motives remain cryptic, and the violence feels starkly real. This lack of clarity leaves a void that the audience's imagination is forced to fill. Chapter 1 may draw more viewers looking for adrenaline and story, but it also may struggle to instill the same lingering dread that the original film so effortlessly created. The Strangers endures as a superior film, not because it's louder or more action-packed, but because it's quieter. Its killers are far more unsettling. Its commitment to realism and claustrophobic tension allow it to tap into fears that transcend the screen. Chapter 1, while entertaining and technically polished, loses some of its primal dread in favor of conventional thrills, something we hope to see flipped in future sequels. For those seeking a horror experience that haunts, lingers, and makes the very act of coming home at night feel just a little more unnerving, The Strangers is the one reason too. It's a masterclass in minimalist terror, a film that needs no flashy gimmicks or elaborate motives to remind us of a terrifying truth. Sometimes danger isn't personal, it's just there, lurking, waiting, because you were home.
Are you a sinner?
Sometimes.